Okay, so maybe you have watched Should I Be a Foster Parent? If you haven't, I'm going to link it in the comments below, and you have come to the conclusion that you are ready to jump into fostering. So where do you start? Do you contact a private agency and look to foster through them, or do you contact the state? This is one of the first and possibly most important decisions that you will make as a foster parent. And today we are going to discuss it. So now you've said yes and you are ready to foster. So what do you decide? Do you contact a private agency or go through the foster agency straight through your state in your particular county? I've seen two extremes when it comes to this decision. Is one, people can't decide. So they just don't foster at all and they just kind of wait around for someone to decide for them. Or the second option is it's kind of like a parachuter that doesn't wait until the airplane reaches 13,000 feet before they jump. And so they just make irrational decisions. They make a decision whether through the state or through an agency, and then later they end up regretting it. But doing that can lead to a couple negative consequences. So not really thinking through this decision can lead to a lot of dissatisfaction, really. It can lead to, number one, is that people just get disheartened or discouraged with the fostering journey altogether, and maybe they'll even stop fostering. Or number two is that they will get part way and then they will decide to switch. And this can waste a lot of time and a lot of money. Sometimes there's actually a reason to switch. For example, a friend of mine who's a presently licensed foster parent got a notice rather suddenly that her private agency was coming to a close. And so she had to make that decision whether to go with another private agency or whether to go through the state. And this was in the middle of having a placement in her home. A second reason for a switch may be that you decide to specialize in a certain age or a certain group of kids. For example, therapeutic foster families. In the state of Washington, we cannot be licensed as therapeutic foster families with the state directly. And so if we want to specialize in that area, we would have to go through a private agency. And so there's lots of different reasons, maybe medically exposed babies or whatever your niche, if you will, of interest could be. You might need to work, and it would be better for you to work actually with a private agency. So a third reason why you might switch to go from a private agency to working directly with the state, or from the state to work with a private agency, would be that you want either more support or less support on your fostering journey. Sometimes working with the state, it can feel like there can be a communication gap, or you just need extra reassurance, and you might want to consider moving to a private agency. Or maybe you're with a private agency and you just want some space to really just care for your kids in your care. It might be a good idea to move to working just directly with the state. Okay, so let's get in and talk about the difference between working with a private foster agency versus working directly with the state. At the end of this video, I'm going to share what our family has done the past 14 years, agency or state, as well as share a few closing thoughts with you. So stay tuned. So the number one reason to work with a private agency may be that you would get greater support with a private agency. And that may include emotional support, relational support, social support, and possibly even financial support. The social workers who work with the state often have a heavy caseload. I've heard of some social workers having a caseload of 25 children to one social worker. And so with a better ratio with social workers in private agency, you are going to get a lot better attention, a lot better focus, and the quality of your support will likely be a lot greater going through a private foster agency. Number two reason to work with a private agency would be that you may have a sense of community depending on your private fostering agency. I've heard that connections between foster families can be a lot greater. There can often be common interest or common religious background. Because the social workers have smaller caseloads, likely you will get more time and more attention, and you will build an actual relationship with your social worker. My understanding as well is that social worker will remain with you through all your different placements. So when you work with the state, each child has their own social worker, and so you may go through 2 dozen social workers in a year, depending on how many kids come into your home. And so the community and sense of belonging is going to be greater within a private agency. So number 3 reason to work with a private agency is that you may get referrals for foster children that are all over your state. When you work directly with the state without a private agency, the kids that you get likely are right from your very own county. When you work through a private agency, you have a bigger scope and a broader reach of the kids that might come into your home. Okay, number 4 reason to have a private foster care agency that you work with is because you would have a filter between you and the state. When you work with the state, again, state social workers have big caseloads, they're busy, and sometimes when you want to pass information, it could be like that game that you played when you were a child, that you would whisper a message into someone's ear and they would pass it on and they would pass it on, and by the time that it got to the last person, that message looked a little bit different than what it was originally intended. And it's not intentional, it's just the way it works when there's a lot of people through the state and the agencies. And so when you work with a private agency, you would have someone directly to go to speak for you and to gather information and bring it to you. And a lot of people enjoy that aspect. It really can take the pressure off the foster family and really help them to focus directly on the foster child. So the 5th reason why you might want to become licensed through a private Christian agency is because everything that you do will have a Christian perspective. Likely your social worker will be a Christian, your training will have a Christian basis, the other foster families will also be Christian, and for some people that's vitally important. Through the state, there is secular training, and it looks a little different than the Christian foster care training. I had a friend who actually went directly through the state, went through 24 hours, week after week of training. And at the end of it, she got kind of discouraged and she ended up not fostering kids. And so for some people, that's just really important. If you would like to have a Christian view, a Christian perspective, a Christian slant on all of what you do within the foster care realm, you might want to choose a Christian foster agency. Okay, getting licensed with the state. Let's talk about some of the reasons you might prefer to get licensed directly through the state as a foster parent. Number 1 is if you go directly through the state, you have 1 social worker instead of 2. If you go through a private agency, you would have the private agency social worker as well as the child social worker that's through the state. So if you are worried about time or your energy or your schedule, possibly going through the state might save some stress or some time or some of your energy. I have heard that the state social worker and the private agency sometimes combine their monthly visits. However, due to schedules and everybody's busyness, sometimes that's just not realistic. And so if you want to save some time and you want to kind of streamline the process of fostering, going through the state might be a great option for you. So the second reason you might want to go get licensed directly through the state is because through the state as a foster parent, you are not legally required to drive that child to weekly visits, sometimes bi-weekly, sometimes 3 visits a week. The state is required to provide that transportation for you, as well as there is a visit supervisor. And so what that is a social worker or a transporter or someone that's contracted in between that would go and sit down with that child and their biological parent and to be able to monitor that visit, whether it's an hour, 2 hours, 3 or 4 hours. What I've heard is that private agencies sometimes require their foster families to attend visits, to drive to visits, and even to supervise their foster visits with their biological families. So if that's something that you just don't feel equipped or capable or that your time might allow, you might consider to go directly through the state. Number 3 reason why you might want to get licensed directly through the state is because chances are you would get your placement for a foster child quicker. Although private agencies do collect kids from around the state agencies, they grab kids within their own county. And my county in particular, we have multiple departments within that county that pull kids from. And so there are enormous amounts of kids that go directly to the state and then they look for placements. And so you might actually get a placement quicker if you get licensed directly through the state. Number 4 reason why you might want to go directly through the state as you get licensed, you will have a greater selection of children that might come into your home. So where a private agency, they may have a really broad reach of kids throughout the entire state, the state agencies, they have a really good understanding of who's actually in the system now within their county. My county in particular, it has multiple departments, and so there's an enormous amount of kids that come into care, and first they contact the state licensed foster parents, and then from there they will go through the agency. And so if you want a broad range of kids that might come into your care and live right in your county, you would want to get licensed with the state. Judges at the same time, when there's cases in the court, they like to see kids placed as close to their biological parents as possible. So what that means is that social workers will look first within their own county for foster homes before looking outside of their county or in different parts of the state. So number 5, the reason you might want to get licensed with the state is because if you do your home study and you do training and you do end up adopting the child that's in your home, all of that is reimbursed. And so you don't have to pay fees up front. With an agency, you would have to pay for a home study. You would have to pay for training as well as a pretty big hefty fee to adopt a child, even out of foster care through a private agency. And so if your goal, even in the back of your mind, might be to adopt a child, going directly through the state might be the option for you. So these are my final thoughts. Making the decision whether to work with a private foster agency or to go directly with the state. It's a big decision, and it's one of the biggest decisions that you will make as a foster parent. It is possible to switch halfway. However, it can also be kind of a hassle and sometimes very expensive. And so our family has worked directly with the state. It's been a great decision for us. The reason that we chose it is because we really wanted to have a say in what kids come to our home. We get to select and choose. We get emails every day of kids and their cases and their stories that we can pick from versus having a social worker or someone else choose for us who can come into our home. And so working with an agency is also a great option if that's the option that works best for your family. So finally, I would suggest to contact foster families in your area. Contact them directly, either online or through a support group that you could attend, or go to the agency themselves and ask them questions. See what's most important to your family. And one agency, it can work really, really well in one state, and then in another, it might not. And maybe your state department is really excellent in a certain county, but in your county it isn't, or vice versa. And so it's really hard to just draw this broad conclusion for everybody that either the state or a private agency is the best option, because it really just depends where you live. And so ask around, ask questions to be able to make a determination of what is best for your family. So some of those questions that you might want to ask an agency or the state agency would be, what is your child and social worker ratio? How many foster families have you worked with? If your goal is adoption, ask them how many adoptions they've done. Ask them about the stipend. Ask them about the fees, maybe for a home study or for an adoption. So maybe ask what the training looks like in your area, how long that agency in particular has worked in your region, or if that agency has any plans of closing in the near future. And finally, I would just encourage you to listen to your gut. Talk to your spouse, talk to your kids. You want to be able to have the full experience and to have an agency or working with the state that would be the best particular fit for your family. Thank you so much for watching this video. Make sure to like this video, subscribe below for more foster care videos like this, and be sure to share. And remember, go out, live bold, and be brave.